This VFR Advanced series aims to teach realism-hungry VATSIMers how to do each and every part of VFR flying, from mag checks all the way up to cross-country VFR and IFR flying in the 182 and other general aviation aircraft. In this video, I'll be carrying on from part 1, where I discussed all of the ins and outs of this video and how these circuits will be done. I'll be following the noise abatement departure procedures and carrying out all the necessary checks highlighted in the previous video. Before we start, I'd like to remind you that all the checks from the previous video are made for self-primed piston aircraft, such as the PA-28. The aircraft I'm flying today is fuel injected and does not have a carb heat. A quick disclaimer, I am not a real pilot, neither am I training to be a real pilot. I'm simply teaching people to consolidate my own information to assist me in obtaining my JAR PPL in the future. Here we are in the cockpit of Golf Lima Echo November X-Ray, a Cessna 172 in the real world, based at Cranfield. A 182 is what we're flying today. I will not be showing you any of the startup, taxi or mag check process in this flight, as these can be explained in detail in another video if anyone requests it. You may question why I'm sitting here shut down then. Well, I want to go through the departure and circuit very quickly again, as it's been a little while since I did the first episode and we all need a refresher. So, very quickly, we'll taxi out to runway 29 for departure and follow the noise abatement departure procedures, which are as follows. After takeoff, turn right to overflow the golf clubhouse, and on passing, turn right to QDM until passing prominent white building. Turn right to fly to a square wood, then turn downwind to fly between Chewin and Chewin Wood, and this is where the necessary checks will be carried out. Unfortunately, Orbex England is not very good at modelling small details like specific buildings and tree organisations, so we'll have to do our best to accommodate. Once on downwind, we will carry out the checks needed, and before we reach Hartford, we will begin our base turn in order to not deafen the neighbours. Making sure that we put 2 notches of flaps down on late downwind, we will descend to 6,000 feet above ground level and prepare to turn final. Then upon reaching 300 feet AGL, the drag flaps will be extended. Phew! With that all out of the way, we can begin. Remember, I'll be going through each and every process in detail once we get to it through the power of editing. I will see you at the holding point. We are now holding short of runway 29, and with the run-ups complete and our intention stated on Pantaca radio, the first check can be carried out. LCA, or Lights, Camera, Action. I'll take you through this step by step, and first of all, we have lights, which is relatively self-explanatory. You make sure you switch on the strobes and the landing lights for departure, and check all other necessary lights are on or off too. Camera means transponder. The use of your transponder is important because otherwise ATC will not be able to identify you. You must switch this to out, which is the furthest right option. Action is the takeoff. Once lights and camera have been completed, all that is left to do is depart. Make sure the final approach is clear, and off we go. The next check that was discussed in the previous video was felt, flaps, engine, lights and trim. This check is to be completed under 500 feet AGL and acts as an after takeoff checklist. The flaps must be retracted, the engine temperatures, pressures and RPM must be in the green, the landing lights must be switched off and the trim must be set to a climb setting. If you find that your RPM is a little high, you can change the pitch of the prop or the power in order to bring the RPM away from the red line. At this point we are following the noise abatement departure procedure, which includes a right hand turn to roughly 340 degrees in the real world, magnetic. I'm trying to replicate that as closely as possible here. The turn to downwind has been completed and we are now stable at 1000 feet AGL. The next check is APT, or Attitude, Power and Trim. This check is to ensure that the aircraft is stable in cruise and isn't going to accelerate, descend or turn unexpectedly. Attitude is ensuring that the aircraft is not pitching up or down unusually. Power is to ensure that the aircraft is going to maintain your desired speed by observing the RPM. This RPM setting will be different for different aircraft, and depending on the weight and altitude of the aircraft, along with other variables, this setting will differentiate. Lastly, trim. This is obvious. Make sure that the trim is set to maintain your desired altitude. And now, for the longest check of them all, BUMPFITCH. This is to be completed when you're mid to late downwind. You need to make sure you leave yourself enough time to carry out the check though. It stands for brakes, undercarriage, mixture, fuel, fuel pump, flaps, pitch, instruments, carb heat, hatches and harnesses. For brakes, make sure the parking brake is off. For undercarriage, ensure that the gear hasn't fallen off by looking out of your window. For mixture, check that it is full rich. This is because it gives you the most fuel, so therefore most power. In the event of a go-around, you want as much power as possible to climb away from the ground. Therefore you need to have your mixture to full rich. Fuel and fuel pump, make sure the aircraft does not have an imbalance in fuel in both of the tanks. This can be devastating when it comes to trying to land if the aircraft is leaning to one side. The fuel pump needs to be on for similar reasons to why the mixture needs to be full rich. It's for safety reasons. Set 2 notches of flaps to aid your descent and deceleration. Check that the pitch of the aircraft is not unusual, and whilst you are looking at the gyro, take a look at the rest of the instruments. Make sure they all indicate green or normal. If you were flying an aircraft with a carb heat, this is when you would turn the carb heat on. Carb heat should always be turned on in any situation that you find yourself in when descending, as the change in power setting can cause ice crystals to form due to different quantities of air travelling into the carburettor. Hatches and harnesses are not simulated in flight sim, however in the real world this is mandatory. Remember to begin your descent from circuit height to 600 feet AGL as soon as you begin your turn to base. Aim to be at 600 feet by the time you turn final. This way you can keep a continuous descent going to landing. In this circuit, I miscalculated my descent rate and I was a little early to reaching 600 feet. Turn final and begin descent to land. Upon passing 300 feet AGL, the carb heat should be turned off and the last notch of drag flap added. Turning off the carb heat gives you a little more RPM, so in the case of a missed approach, more power is available. I really do hope this video helped you in some way or taught you something about flying in circuits. I put a lot of work into these types of videos and I love to hear positive and constructive feedback. Please do leave me a comment below, and remember, I'm not a real pilot, so there are likely to be some errors in this video. However, the majority of it is correct and can be applied to your VATSIM flights or even your real ones.